Okay, everybody, I think we're going to get started in the sake of time. Thanks for sticking it out to the end of the day. This is the last session block of the Virtual Community Exchange, so we're really excited that so many of you stuck around with us. Many of you were in the last session, I think, so you might know me, but I'm Anna Whitson. I am an Outreach and Partnership Specialist for the IATI Secretariat, sitting at UNDP in New York. So I'm going to be moderating this panel today. And we have a really interesting and exciting panel of speakers today that you'll see on your screen, who I think will all be introducing themselves a little bit later as they go through their presentations. So let's just dive right in then. A little bit about what we're going to be covering today. It's kind of funny timing, I was thinking, as you know, everyone has been on Zoom for the better part of today. So we're talking a little bit about kind of Zoom fatigued, our reliance on digital tools, and how we can kind of overcome some of those challenges and really strengthen our virtual communities. Obviously, this is an interesting year and a half. 2020 and 2021 have been challenges to keep up engagement during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we thought it was really important to bring this to the IATI community to see if we have some tips and tricks to kind of overcome these challenges, and also to strengthen our digital community in the meantime, especially as we have this new virtual platform, IATIconnect.org. So we're gonna have a few different speakers. One, our colleague Romy will be talking about Zoom engagement in this kind of post-COVID virtual world that we live in. And then we'll also have some speakers talking a little bit about, opportunities and threats to virtual engagement given this kind of new context. And lastly, we'll talk a little bit about how we move forward. So how does this relate to what we're doing at IATI and what we're trying to do? So with that, I think we'll just dive right in, and I'm going to introduce our first speaker here, Romy Alexandra, who is an expert when it comes to experiential virtual learning. So she's going to do some kind of fun interactive exercises, so hopefully that will wake us up a little bit at the end of the day. And she's also going to share kind of some tips and tricks on how we might be able to overcome some of the Zoom fatigue we have, and some key ingredients that really can help us to strengthen our effective virtual engagements based on her expertise. So with that, Romy, I will hand over to you, and thank you very much in advance.
Thank you so much, Anna. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever in the world you are based. It's so nice to see some faces, to know that there are people behind the screen, but I also understand we'll be talking a little bit about Zoom fatigue. If you feel, okay, I just can't even put my video on right now, no problem. We'd love to start with a little chatterfall activity to get to know each other more. So a chatterfall, we'll talk a bit more today about cognitive load and how Zoom fatigue, and Zoom in general, and not just Zoom, but all online platforms. Let's not hate on Zoom. Zoom does a lot of great things. How it can be exhausting to hear people and, write in the chat and read what's happening in the chat. So our first connecting activity is also a way to prevent cognitive overload as well. So what I'm going to ask you to do is briefly introduce yourself in the chat, but don't click enter yet. So I know some people are already typing furiously. So please just share, if you want to share something about yourself, where in the world maybe you're located, or what are you doing? But especially, I love this question here that really connects with the topic of today's panel. What do you do to connect with others during these times of social distancing? So what are some ways you're finding to connect? Please don't click enter. We're going to all click enter at the same time. So I'll give you a nice little moment to fill that in the chat, and then just wait for my cues, and we'll all click enter at the same time. Okay, so if you have maybe where you're based, something you want to share about yourself, but also what are you doing to connect? Please put that in the chat. And when you are ready, you can give me a nice thumbs up if you're on camera, or even a digital reaction thumbs up on Zoom when you're finished. What we're going to do is we're all going to click enter at the same time, and it's going to create, we call it a chatterfall because it creates a waterfall of chat. So I see some thumbs up here. So when I say Chatterfall, that can be our magic word today. When I say Chatterfall, you can click enter, and then we'll all take a nice moment in silence to read through and see who's actually here in the room. So 3, 2, 1, Chatterfall, go. Nice. Okay, let's see who is here. Awesome. I'm seeing so many great different countries, so many great different connecting activities. Wonderful. Okay, thank you all so much. So this is already one new tool you can use no matter what platform you're using to prevent cognitive load, because it's really exhausting to type, write, read. So, but anyway, most importantly, we wanted to welcome you to this session and get to know you all. So thank you for introducing yourselves. So before we get started with the panel, we really want to set up and prepare you all for success. I don't know if you're aware, but Stanford University recently published did some excellent research on Zoom fatigue. They called it the Zoom Exhaustion and Fatigue Scale Research. And they found that there were 4 main leading reasons for Zoom fatigue. So what we wanted to do to help prepare you for this session is quickly go through them, but mainly give you some nice solutions for how to overcome them so that you can feel the most refreshed and energized and ready for this panel. So the first cause is seeing yourself during video chats. It is very exhausting. If we were meeting right now at an in-person workshop, I would not have a mirror in front of my face, and neither would you. And unfortunately, that is the default mode here in Zoom, but there is a way to turn it off. So what I would like to do is ask you to find hide self view. If you, you're going to find it on your Zoom square. So if you try and take your mouse and scroll over your nose, all of a sudden this blue button on the top right next to the mute, there'll be these 3 little dots. And if you click there, you'll see hide self view. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that your video is still on, so people can still see you, but just take a little moment and see the difference of what that's like to really see more of the people or the slides without seeing yourself, because it really helps us recreate that in-person experience. If you are freaking out that you don't know how your hair looks or whatever it is, don't worry, you can still put it back. In the top right hand where you have gallery view and speaker view, you'll also have in the latest update of Zoom, you can show self view. But I highly encourage you, if you're not using it, try it out for this whole panel and see what kind of a difference that makes, because it really is tiring for us to constantly be staring at ourselves when we're trying to talk about connection, which is about connecting with other people here in the room. So cause number 2, I already started speaking about this, but the cognitive load is so much higher in video chats. So I love gallery view. I'm a huge fan of gallery view, and I love seeing all this wonderful people from all over the world here today. However, each little tiny movement that all of us are making is an input that our brain is having to take in and absorb. So we're really exhausted and overloaded with inputs. What I want to encourage you to do is play with some of your views. So the first one, I don't know if you're familiar, but side-by-side mode, I think this is a great way just in general to foster more connection online instead of just the slides. So if you go up to the top of your screen, you'll see a green bar that'll say you are viewing Rebecca's screen. Next to that is a view options, and in the drop down is side-by-side mode. For some of you that might already be automatic, but if not, please put it on. And what you'll see now probably is the slides and then maybe myself, and I will remove my spotlight for a moment so that you can also see others. If you go to the top right hand, you'll see the speaker and gallery view. You'll see the slides and the people here in this room. But maybe you don't know that that gray bar in the middle is actually something you can move. So at any point, if you say, I'm seeing too much slides, I want to see more people, you can move it all the way to the left and you can wave and say hi to these great people in this space here. But also if you feel, okay, I need to go back to the slides and see what's there, you can also expand and make it bigger left or right. And that only affects your screen. So really don't worry about that. That would be one great tip. And the other tip I would encourage you to do is, because I said gallery view is wonderful for connection, but can be exhausting for Zoom fatigue, is to see how you can play around with these different views. So try right now, instead of in gallery view, see what happens if you go in speaker view. And then you'll just see me. And I think maybe it's just me. I see Anna, but I don't know. And so it's really a great way for you as we move into the panelists to see, is this a moment I want gallery view, or will it actually help me feel less exhausted if I'm just focusing on the speaker? So play around with those views as you need. The next one, video chats dramatically reduce our usual mobility. If we were in a training in person or workshop in person, we would find different ways to stand up, move around, maybe move into groups. And we're not doing that enough in the online space, and our bodies are taking the toll for it. So we really want to encourage all of you, today we'll do a little mini energizer, but I also encourage all of you, as you have your online meetings and you want to foster connection, try to find ways to use kinesthetic movement for your participants to get up. It gets the brains and bodies working and will help us further deep dive into the session. So we can go to the next slide, because I have a little surprise for you. We call it Zumba, Zumba, but for Zoom. It's not too intensive. Don't worry, I'm not going to make you start exercising here, but I am going to ask everyone to please, something maybe you're still not used to doing in the online space, I'm going to ask you to actually stand up right now and do some kind of stretch that feels so good for you. Whatever it is, you can reach to the sky and stretch that out, or reach down and touch your toes. Like, this is self-care. You've been at a panel all day long. You deserve some nice Zumba stretching. Anything that feels good to you. That is so key. Oh man, feels great. I also needed that. So thank you. Appreciate you participating and going along with that. So cause number 4 of Zoom fatigue is excessive amounts of close-up eye contact. It's, as you know, like there's so much in there, right? So one is that we're not usually at this distance from ourselves, but also we're not often just staring constantly at a screen. I was talking the other day with someone and he said, you're right, even when we were at the office together, I'd have a meeting and I'd talk to someone, but then I might like look away and think about something, and we're not doing that so much in the online space. So I wanted to give you all a little moment to really also help us further connect with the topic that we're doing. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes for a moment, or if you're super uncomfortable with that, at least look away from the screen. Maybe you want to lower your gaze. And I'm going to just ask you to think about a couple of things to prepare us for this session. So really just take this nice moment, again, self-care, just closing your eyes and looking away from the screen. And since today's panel is all about connection and community, I wanted to ask you to think about for a moment with your eyes closed. You don't need to look at the screen for this. What was a workshop, an online workshop or event of any kind where you really felt genuine human connection? And what was it specifically about that event that made you feel that connection? So think about that for a little bit. And you can open your eyes whenever you want. So yeah, get that nice little refresh a bit. And I'd love to ask you, if you don't mind, to put in the chat, what were some of those elements that made a really nice and connecting event? Any and all responses are welcome. There's no right or wrong. So feel free to throw some of those ideas in the chat. I hope someone here had connecting events. I know that you have. Great. So we have polls, activities, breakout rooms, informal time after the meeting. Great. Good exercises, warmth and humor of the hosts, relaxed atmosphere, space for casual conversations, genuine human interaction, side-by-side speaker videos, informal interactions. Yeah, okay, I love what I'm hearing here. So I mean, today I'm so excited, I will pass it off. This was just our preparation, but I just wanted to encourage you to bring all of that great experience that you have here. As you hear this panelist speaking about their excellent experience, don't forget about your own experience and please, the more you share in the chat, the more we can all get ideas like, oh yeah, I haven't done a great meeting over dinner or had some kind of informal interaction. So maybe that's something more that we can add to our own meetings. So I want to thank you all. That's it. That's my time for today. I just wanted to thank you all for joining with this activities and encourage, please don't let these causes and solutions stay here. I encourage you to spread them, share them, tell more people about them, because Zoom really does get a bad rep, and it's not about the platform, it's how we use it. And so I encourage you to really think about what we can do moving forward to increase that connection online. Thank you all so much. Wonderful to be here.
Thank you, Romy, and thanks for that little stretching moment. I really enjoyed that because I've been moderating a couple panels in a row, so it was a good excuse to get up and stretch my back a little. So I appreciate it. But yeah, I think that's really, really useful information. I think these are things we don't think about all the time, that we're making eye contact constantly in a screen, that we are sitting and not moving for hours at a time, and all these things that in this new kind of post-COVID world, we're still getting used to. So I think, like Romy said, I would really encourage everyone to take those tips and tricks away, because I definitely found those super useful. And I think good information to share with other people as we, maybe having these, virtual meetings increasingly in the future, and as we still kind of battle COVID and all of these kind of things. So I think really great information, and thanks again, Romy. So I think we're going to move on to kind of the second segment of the presentation now, of the session. And we're going to hear from 3 different speakers, and each one of them is kind of active in their own umbrella network that is, connected to IATI in some way. So we're going to hear from them kind of some thoughts and reflections on how their own community engagement was impacted by COVID and by needing to be online and kind of this transition, and really, what they've learned. So we have those 3 speakers. First is Nancy from Site Savers, who's also co-chair at the Bond IATI Community of Practice, Andy Ocon working for Open Contracting Partnership, and Natalie Sidibe representing OpenStreetMap Mali. So again, in case of any comments after the presenters make their reflections and their remarks, please go ahead and just drop those into the chat box, and we'll try to come back to those as well. So just as before we introduce the first speaker, Natalie from OpenStreetMap Mali, just to know, I think her intervention will be in French. So if you do need interpretation into French, French to English, at this point, this would be a good opportunity to switch that on. So Natalie, just wondering if you can, quickly introduce yourself, maybe share a fun fact with the audience, and then kind of briefly introduce OpenStreetMap Mali and your community engagement tools. So a couple minutes over to you, Natalie. Thank you so much.
Okay, merci beaucoup, Anna.
Okay. Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you, everyone. I am delighted to be part of this panel. I am Nathalie Sidibe from Mali. I'm co-founder of OpenStreetMap Mali. I sing when I'm in a good mood. So when I'm in a good mood, I like to sing everywhere. So OpenStreetMap Mali is a community of passionate volunteers. They are passionate about open data. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So I'm just wondering, Natalie, if you might be able to share with us a little bit of, how you've dealt with virtual engagements in this new kind of post-COVID world. So is there anything you can think about in terms of how COVID changed the global OpenStreetMap community engagement, how you engaged with colleagues, or anything you can share with us on how COVID might have impacted that community engagement?
Déjà, le projet OpenStreetMap est un projet.
OpenStreetMap project is a collaborative project, first of all. which means that we are used to working remotely without being together. So with COVID, our activities have still changed. We were already used to working remotely, but with lockdowns, we cannot all meet together as we were used to. So we started using tools such as Zoom, Google Meet, in order to continue our meetings and see each other.
Thank you, Natalie, so much. We really appreciate your comments. So thank you. So I think now we're going to move on to, after Natalie's intervention, just a little bit of a poll to kind of spice things up here. So maybe I can have my colleagues in the background launch the poll. So we're interested to hear what you think on kind of, you know, reflecting about today's virtual community exchange. Is there a need to have in-person events in the future, and kind of thinking about what the value of those events might be? So the first option that you can choose, so please select one, would be that I agree, we should get rid of in-person conferences. So we really don't have any need for in-person conferences. Second option would be, I kind of have mixed feelings. Sometimes there is a need for in-person events, sometimes not. Third would be disagree. Virtual exchanges can never replace in-person events. Or fourth option would be, I don't have a strong preference. So it looks like people are voting now. I'm not sure if others can see on the screen, but very strong preference for mixed feelings. So it looks like people are still seeing the value in in-person events, but increasingly also see, I think, virtual exchanges as maybe a complement to in-person events that maybe can even serve a complementary or slightly different purpose. So really, really interesting. Great. So I think we'll stop sharing that. I think 92% had mixed feelings on that one. So strong support for keeping in-person events and virtual events both in the mix. Great. Okay, so I think we're going to move on to our second speaker. So Nancy is co-chair of the IATI Community of Practice within Bond, and I'll let her introduce herself a little bit, but just to say that this is a community of practice within Bond itself, so very complementary to our own IATI communities of practice, but they've got their own going on over there. So Nancy, maybe you can quickly introduce yourself, share a fun fact about yourself or about Bond, and then really briefly introduce Bond and how you have been working to kind of steward community engagement and what kind of tools that you use, especially this IATI community of practice that you have within Bond. So over to you.
Thanks, Anna. Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Nancy Duckles. I work for Sightsavers and I'm the transparency and IATI lead there. So I look after our IATI publication. And then also, as Anna said, I'm also the co-chair for the Bond IATI Community of Practice. But before I talk about that, I should say my fun fact. I really struggled to think of a fun fact about myself, which is quite depressing, isn't it? To like say those words out loud. My fun fact is that I bought my first home at the end of last year, which sort of wasn't fun. You know, it was actually immensely stressful, but it's fun now that I'm in it. So that's the good news that I wanted to share. But yes, anyway, more relevant to today, I work for Sightsavers as Senior Transparency Officer, and I am the co-chair of the Bond IATI Community of Practice. So Bond, for anybody that doesn't know, is a UK organisation, and it's basically like a network for development organisations. So CSOs and other government organisations are all involved with Bond. And basically, for somebody like me who turned up to the IATI sphere a few years ago now, Bond was one of the first places I was shown to go to get some information about IATI and meet some of my contemporaries in the transparency community. So for me personally, my experience has been, as well as the official IATI kind of digital space and the old community site that we were all on, Bond for me in the UK has been a really great place to go and get information and sort of speak to my peers and my colleagues across the sector. So I am here as the Bond co-chair. I don't work for Bond. I can't represent Bond, nor would I want to. But yeah, so the IATI community of practice kind of is what it says on the tin. It's a subgroup of the wider transparency working group. And so the community of practice focuses specifically on IATI, surprise, surprise. We would meet quarterly in person, and essentially it would sort of act as like a one-stop shop for anybody who kind of had any pressing queries. You know, you would get new publishers turning up saying, what am I doing? How does this work? It was also a space for us to kind of have dialogue with the UK government about their donor requirements, which is something that's been talked about today. So it was a really useful place as like a repository of like information and places to go and try and get some answers, really. Obviously, that's all moved online. And it's been a really interesting exercise, you know, and I must be honest, I think I can only speak for myself, and I think the temptation with running this stuff online is I need to replicate those physical meetings in a digital space. You know, I need to replicate that content, but just put it online and get everybody to come and listen to it. And I guess that's kind of true to some extent. That content is still really important. We still have that information that we want to get across. We still have those discussion points, but I need to do it in a different way. Because as you know, as Romy was telling us about, you know, so eloquently and so interestingly, you know, this is a different method of communicating. You know, I can't rely on sitting in a room and, you know, being able to kind of like make eye contact with people and not make eye contact with people if I don't want to, you know, and all that sort of thing. So we've really had to think about how can we do this in the most engaging way possible. And I have to say, I'm kind of going off script a bit here, but I think today has been a really fantastic example of that. You know, I found the exchange event today really engaging and really well run, you know, on the online space. And it's given me plenty of ideas and thoughts for how we can sort of make the best possible use of the IATI community of practice going forwards as well. And also the final thing I'll say really is that, you know, somebody earlier, about 20 years ago, it feels like now, but I think it was only about 4 hours ago, they were talking about, I think it was Cherie talking about the digital divide, you know, and it's very easy to make assumptions that everybody has the same digital literacy and also the same digital capabilities, you know, and again, that's given me some real food for thought as well. You know, we are primarily a UK organisation, but, you know, we're also talking about reaching out to partners and in various different countries too. But yeah, I think that's it from me. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Nancy. I think you actually even answered my follow-up questions for you. So I think that was really useful. And yeah, I think really good to point to this whole digital divide issue, which I think is increasingly important as we transition to a lot of these online tools for engagement, thinking through, you know, the diversity of, you know, access to internet and access to different platforms and things like that. So that's definitely something I think we at the IATI Secretariat are definitely thinking through as we move forward, seeing, you know, if Zoom is the right platform and kind of gauging feedback from people on how this is working and how we can strengthen it for all different stakeholders who have, you know, different levels of access to, you know, broadband and things like this as well. So I think that's a really good point to point out as well. So I think we will launch a poll now. I think my colleagues will launch a poll behind the scenes. So wanting to hear from you all here in the room, what do we think is the main barrier for people to engage virtually with IATI? So do you think it's that people or yourself don't know how or where to engage? Do we think that there is kind of a barrier to entry with, you know, the technical level of discussions? Is there not enough information to allow people to discuss, you know, at not such a highly technical level? Is it, you know, a time issue? We all know that this is for some people their third, fourth, fifth job, you know, obviously not spending their whole day on IATI. So is it the timing, or is it really, you know, something else generally? It looks like so far discussions that might be too technical. Maybe people don't have time. We got a little split here. Also, maybe not knowing where to engage. So I think this is all really good feedback. I think that's something we're actively trying to work on within IATI is broadening the conversations to not just be about the technical, but bringing in stakeholders from the policy side of the house, from the data use side of the house. So definitely good to hear from you all that this is something that there's, I think, probably support for in the room. In terms of I don't have time, I think if we lower the barrier to entry for people to participate, hopefully streamline things and let them know, where is the best place to engage on what. Hopefully that will help with some of the time sensitivity issues. And then also not knowing where or how to engage. I think this virtual community exchange today is a really good example of one of the easy ways to engage with other stakeholders, and glad to hear that it sounds like some people are finding good value in this setup. But I think also our online digital space, IATIconnect.org, is also a super easy way to start engaging with the IATI community and with other peers in the community, asking questions, sharing experiences. So really good to just note that space as well, IATIconnect.org. Great. So I think we will just go on to, I believe, our final speaker. So from the Open Contracting Partnership, I wanted to introduce you to Andy Okong. So Andy, questions to you are, again, as with the other speakers, if you could just quickly introduce yourself, maybe share a fun fact if you have one at the top of mind, and briefly, introduce Open Contracting Partnership and any community engagement tools that you use. That would be great. So over to you.
Thank you so much, Anna. My name is Andy Okon, as Anna said, and I'm the Community and Capacity Building Manager at Open Contracting Partnership. And I'm happy to be sharing our insights about our community here with you today. Primarily, what we do at Open Contracting Partnership is basically help governments and our other partners, including civil society, private sector, and anybody generally interested in procurement data, to think about procurement differently in terms of open governance and open data as well, so that this can push reform in the procurement space. So what I do as our community manager is that I support all the members of our community across the different stakeholders that I have mentioned to you in providing capacity building for them, providing resources for them to carry out their open contracting reform journeys, and also having periodic engagements with the community to keep the conversations about open contracting going on a continuous basis. I just realized I forgot to mention one thing. I was told to mention one fun fact about me. One fun fact about me is that in my spare time, when I'm not talking about Open Contracting Partnership, I am manufacturing candy. So back to Open Contracting Partnership. So with our communities, with the pandemic, we saw a shift because a lot of the time, our goal was to meet our community members where they were at. And this meant that we were traveling to our community members to carry out capacity building exercises. And this could happen as frequently as twice in a month. And with the pandemic, obviously, we weren't able to travel. And thankfully, we were already delivering some of our sessions virtually. But having to pivot completely to delivering everything online was something that we had to think proactively and make changes drastically to our approach to delivering to our community members. So it was important for us to think of every community member in their context, in terms of their access to technology, and in terms of engagement levels, how advanced they were in their contracting journey, and what sort of support they had requested from us. So beyond using newsletters to keep our community members up to date, we conduct webinars on a quarterly basis, because monthly can be a little too frequent. As we've said, there's a lot of Zoom fatigue. So on a quarterly basis, and then we also have technical support calls for our community members. So those are some of the ways that we've thought it's important to access our community. But the main thing that we've kept at the center of how we reach our community is meeting people in their contexts.
Thank you so much, Andy. That's really interesting, and also great to hear your fun fact. That was a really good fun fact, by the way. So when we get back to in-person meetings, we will all be expecting you to bring some candy along to that, hopefully. So I think we will just do one more poll, and then maybe we'll wrap up some questions for all of the panel together to reflect on it and see if there's any questions. So let's see if my colleagues could launch the last poll, that would be great. The last poll is just about partnering with other networks. So I have a sneaking suspicion I would know how people would answer this, but just wondering what you guys think about the need to partner up with other virtual networks, for example, to draw in new audiences. So do you agree with this, that we definitely need to partner up with other networks? Disagree that we might not benefit, that maybe it would be too much work and not enough benefit? No strong preference, or maybe you just need a little bit more time to reflect on that. So we'll just give it a second and see what people think about this. And 0% of us disagree, so that's good to know. But it looks like the majority of us either don't have a strong preference or agree that IATI should be partnering with other networks, like the ones that our colleagues who've just spoken are coming from. So I think that's really important, and also just referring back to kind of the conversations that are happening in the comments as well, trying to find a balance, I think, between partnering with new networks and countering this, need to learn a new platform, need to, figure out where to go to contribute. So I think there's a balancing act with bringing in new partners and sharing information, but also trying to figure out what the best, way to engage with new partners is, where to do that. And like Andy said, I think really meeting people kind of where they are. So that's maybe something good to think about going forward. So I think we're basically at the end of the official program, but as I've been reflecting on some of the things that our panelists have said, I thought it might be good just to pose one or two questions to the panel or to any of the speakers that have spoken today. I think what I heard from you all is that, you're trying to figure out how to combat Zoom fatigue, but also, bring the positives and the benefits of having in-person meeting into the community space, into this like kind of online community space. So I wonder if there's any, we've heard a little bit about this from all of you, but I wonder if you have any best practices to share about how you've kind of formed these new partnerships together, bringing people into the space, or whether, you found that, a supply or demand driven approach is best. For instance, is it best to have, a drop-in space for people to come and chat when they have the time, an online space where people can come, comment at their own leisure? Have you found it's useful to have kind of webinars where you're trying to get everyone into a room together? So maybe just some reflections on how you've been able to do this tangibly and what you've found kind of most useful.
Yeah, I mean, my annoying answer is kind of a bit of both.
Yeah.
Of what you were just saying, so in terms of the Bond IATI community of practice, we have scheduled meetings every quarter, but we also have like an online forum space that's run through the Bond website. They facilitate it, where people can post questions or queries anytime that they want, really. So we have a combination of like a scheduled routine, and people expect those quarterly calls to come around. But then there is also, as I say, the online space where you can, post away to your heart's content if the mood takes you. I think for me, the stuff about trying to sort of, it's very hard to magic up engagement, isn't it? And it's not something that any of us can sort of just press a button and then it's there. And my experience is that, if these you've got to have the right people taking the online meetings, and you've got to kind of have people who are going to sort of like drum up a bit of enthusiasm and be enthusiastic, and I don't mean that like we all need to be show people, but it's just about sort of playing to people's strengths and also getting people enthused, so people like, Romy at the beginning there, is exactly the sort of person who will get us all like making fools of ourselves stretching in front of the camera, you know, because she's just charming like that, you know. I'm saying too much, but yeah, I mean, so for me it's an ongoing thing of, you know, one can't just like rustle up engagement. It has to be organic, but at the same time I have a responsibility, I feel, to try and nurture some of that and kind of channel it in that direction as well.
I think to add to what Nancy said, I think something else I found important in virtual community engagement and exchange is that there is a strong need for collaboration. And when I even think of collaboration, it goes beyond even just your immediate virtual space of where you're having the meetings. Think about the virtual community that you have and how maybe COVID has denied you access to some places you would typically travel to do field research and field work. Is a great way to collaborate with people within your virtual community to reach those places that you probably aren't going to be able to reach in the foreseeable future. And then your further exchange and collaboration can then again happen virtually, I would say. That's the one thing I thought to add.
So many ideas come to mind, but what I loved what you mentioned, Anna, was about the space. And so when I think about the virtual space, I'm reminded that, okay, when we have in-person workshops or events, you know, there's always those people who like to stay afterwards and talk to the speakers, and they like to kind of hang out and ask some more questions. And one thing that's a bit unsettling about the online space is it's okay, you can end meeting and it literally ends for everyone. And so you don't get those nice, beautiful, you know, coffee break, water cooler discussions. So I think it was mentioned here in the chat, which is so great, but also just one thing I'm trying to do more of in events is really make sure that people know from the beginning, you know, this is the official time, but I will keep this room open for X amount of minutes more in case people want to linger. I can answer questions, but also I can put people into breakout rooms if they want to continue networking. So I think that's really important. And then, as you mentioned, not everyone engages in the same way. And so making sure we're mindful of how are we engaging all different kinds of learning styles, all different kinds of, you know, just in general, everyone, and how do we create also that psychological safety in the online space. So I know that we have these events to have really amazing content and like come here and talk about really important topics. But in the facilitation world, we talk about how important connection is before content. And so before you want people to really start to dive in and brainstorm and be vulnerable and open to share their ideas openly in a call with maybe, I don't know, 30 people or something like this, or even more. We first want to find ways to connect people with each other. Maybe it's in a breakout room or even through connecting questions in the chat. And so I think that is often ignored as a way to then, that really drives engagement throughout the meeting.
Yeah, great. Thank you guys. Those are all super useful comments. I think that is something, just on Romy's last point of this, almost more informal engagement that tends to happen in these face-to-face spaces. I think that's definitely something we were trying to conceptualize how to do for this exchange. And, you know, we didn't put together kind of like a, you know, breakout room pubs or something like this, but maybe that's something we should do for next time, because I think, you know, it is important to have that informal space to kind of connect with your colleagues and to have an ability to ask additional questions and these kind of things. So I think that's definitely something I think I, or at least other members of the Secretariat, will take away for maybe the next virtual community exchange is, you know, having more informal space. And then also, like Romy said, thinking about the diversity of ways that people learn. And as Andy and Nancy said, kind of meeting people where they are as well. So I think really, really interesting and good reflections there. So thank you so much. I think we're almost out of time, and I don't see any real comments for the panel in the chat box, but if any last comments now, speak now or forever hold your peace in the chat box. But just in closing, I think just to note a few things about how we can kind of continue the virtual engagement within the IATI space. We have our virtual community platform platform IATI Connect. So that's iaticonnect.org. And that's just been launched at the very end of 2020. So it's still a relatively new platform. But we've been having some really good engagement on the platform and all different kinds of topic areas. And I think this is one way we can start kind of broadening the community beyond just talking about the very, very technical things. So bringing in, like we said, you know, the data users or the policy people, or all these different facets of what it means to engage with IATI. So if you haven't registered, would definitely encourage you to do that. I think we have it up on the slide here. And we do run kind of crash courses every other month on how to engage with that tool. I heard Taya in the comments basically saying, you know, it's always difficult to learn another tool. So, you know, not always ideal, but we're trying to kind of lower the barrier to entry there. So happy to give, you know, one-to-one support or have anyone join those bi-monthly crash courses to learn more about how to use the platform to connect with the community. And as you do that, like I said, it's a new platform, so we're always really happy to hear feedback on what you think is working, what's not working, especially with this group who we have a lot of community engagement experts in the room. So super happy to hear your feedback or best practices that you might have that would help us, you know, strengthen the IATI Connect space. And we're going to be doing kind of a bit of a review of the space in the next couple months. So stay tuned to provide feedback on IATI Connect on that. And just to mention also, we will be having another one of these virtual community exchanges near the end of 2021. So if you have any feedback as the engagement experts on how to strengthen that, very happy for you guys to, you know, contact me, contact the Secretariat. We'll also be sending a feedback survey after the VCE closes. So definitely please engage with us on how to kind of strengthen the exchanges going forward, because we'd love to hear from you on how to make this, like, these events stronger and better for everyone involved.